dusk bled slow across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised violet and rust. Beneath it, the townsfolk gathered in a restless ring around the gallows, their murmurs rising like locusts in a wheat field. Two figures stood on the rough plank scaffold, one a man of broad shoulders and steady jaw, the other a young woman whose trembling hands betrayed the calm she tried to summon. A hemp rope swayed from each beam, creaking in rhythm with the evening wind. Clara May Dalton kept her chin lifted, though the noose itched against her neck, and the smell of pine sap from the fresh-cut beam mingled with the sour sweat of fear. She was only 22, and her life had been a quiet one until that cursed night when she overheard voices meant to remain in shadows. Her cousin Eli, 24, stood beside her with wrists bound tight, his mouth pressed into a grim line. He looked every inch the blacksmith's son, solid, enduring, but his eyes flicked to her with a brotherly kind of sorrow, as though his strength might be her last refuge. The sheriff strutted before the crowd, his spurs biting gravel. "They knew what they shouldn't," he barked, voice rasping with authority rehearsed too often. "Gold gone missing, payroll, stolen. These two had ears where they didn't belong. You want safety, you want silence, then justice must be swift. No trial, no testimony, just the town's hunger for certainty, even if it came at the price of truth." Clara wanted to shout, to beg them to see reason, but shame burned hotter than fear. She saw faces in the crowd, neighbors, churchfolk, men she had sold pies to, and not one dared meet her eyes. They looked instead at the dirt, at the ropes, at anything but the girl and her cousin waiting for death. Eli leaned close, his whisper rough as stone. "Hold fast, Clara. Don't let you break." Her lips trembled around a prayer she could not finish. She thought of her mother's hymns, the ones sung soft while kneading bread, and clung to them as the sheriff gave the signal. The trap door beneath their boots shuddered, then dropped. The ropes snapped taut. For a heartbeat she hung suspended, the world narrowing to the strangled silence in her chest. But then, wood groaned. A crack split the air. The beam above them, green and not yet seasoned, gave way with a scream of splinters. Both bodies crashed to the earth, gasping, half-choked, bruised but alive. The crowd surged back in confusion, then laughter rippled cruelly. "Devil spared 'em," someone jeered. "Leave the vultures their feast." The sheriff spat and waved them off. "Let 'em rot where they lie." His boots struck the boardwalk sharp as a judge's gavel, and one by one the people drifted away, muttering about unfinished justice, about omens best left alone. Soon only dust remained, hanging thick in the twilight. Clara coughed against the dirt, lungs raw, her throat ringed with rope burn. Eli crawled to her side, fury warring with despair. "We're still alive," he said, though the words felt brittle, uncertain. A wagon wheel creaked. Out of the thinning light rode a lone figure, reins loose in one hand. His hat brim cast a shadow over a face weathered by sun and solitude. Jedidiah Cole was his name, rancher, widower, a man whose presence was spoken of in hushed tones at the saloon but seldom in detail. He dismounted slow, each step deliberate, until he knelt beside the broken pair. He did not ask questions. He did not scold nor comfort. His hand, large and scarred, brushed Clara's wrist, searching for the fragile pulse there. His eyes, gray as riverstone, met hers only a moment, and in that glance lay neither pity nor judgment, only the quiet fact of her survival. Without ceremony, he lifted her into his arms, then helped Eli to his feet. The town's eyes still watched from windows, though none dared speak. Clara heard them whisper, "Fool rancher, he'll regret it." Yet Jed's silence was armor, his gait steady as he carried her to the wagon and set her gently upon a folded blanket. He took up the reins and turned the horse toward the open plains. The ride was long, moon rising pale above them, coyotes calling in the distance. Eli sat stiff, arms crossed, shame weighing him heavier than chains. Clara lay against the boards, each jolt of the wheel sending pain through her bruised ribs. She studied the man who had taken them in. His shoulders were broad beneath a worn coat, his profile cut against the night as though carved from oak. He spoke not a word, yet something in the way he kept the horse steady, the way he glanced back now and again to be sure she had not slipped, carried more weight than 100 sermons. At last they reached his spread, a lonely ranch crouched against the hills, lantern light spilling soft through a single window. Horses stirred in the corral, tails flicking at flies, while the scent of sagebrush hung sweet in the cooling air. Jed lifted Clara once more, carried her inside and laid her on a cot by the fire. He draped a quilt over her shoulders, rough wool smelling faintly of cedar. She whispered hoarsely, "Why?" But he only shook his head, as though the question needed no answer. Eli crouched close, still wary. "Why's he helping us?" he muttered. Clara's eyes lingered on the firelight, catching Jed's weathered face as he sat silent in a wooden chair, pipe resting idle in his hand. She felt exhaustion pull at her, yet a fragile warmth pressed against the hollow place fear had left. Because no one else would, she breathed and closed her eyes. The logs cracked, sending sparks into the dim rafters. Outside, the prairie, stretched endless and unknowable. Inside, the silence was not cruel but sheltering. For the first time since the rope brushed her neck, Clara believed morning might yet come. Dawn crept gently over the plains, laying a thin veil of gold across the ranch. Clara awoke to the scent of coffee and wood smoke, her body aching but alive. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft scrape of a chair and the measured tread of boots across the wooden floor. Jedidiah Cole moved with the patience of a man long accustomed to solitude, his silence filling the space more surely than words. When he set a tin cup near her cot, steam curling in the cool morning air, she lifted it with trembling hands and whispered thanks. He nodded once, eyes unreadable, before turning to the window where the horizon stretched endless. Eli hovered nearby, restless, his pride raw from being forced to rely on another man's charity. He busied himself with kindling, chopping wood until sweat beaded his brow, though Jed never asked for the labor. Clara sensed her cousin's shame, saw the way he avoided Jed's gaze. Yet she also noticed the way Jed let it pass, granting Eli the dignity of silence. It struck her then that mercy could come without fanfare, offered in the space where judgment might have been. But mercy, in a place like theirs, was dangerous. The town had not forgotten, nor forgiven. By the third day, horsemen rode out across the prairie, their silhouettes bristling against the sun. Clara and Eli watched from the porch as 5 deputies dismounted, rifles slung casual but ready. Their leader, a narrow-eyed man with a scar running down his cheek, called out, "Cole, we know you got him inside. Sheriff wants the job finished." Jed stepped forward, shoulders square, rifle in hand but barrel low. His voice, when it came, was calm as a river stone. "Ain't handing over folks who never had their say. If you're looking for blood, you'll not find it here." The deputies shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. The scarred man spat into the dust. "You're making yourself an enemy of the law, Jed." Jed's gray eyes held steady. "If law means hanging innocents, then maybe the law's already the enemy." The silence stretched, taut as a drawn rope. Then the men swung back onto their horses, muttering threats that hung in the air long after they vanished over the ridge. Clara felt her knees weaken, not from relief but from the knowledge that reprieve was temporary. The storm would return, heavier. That night, she sat by the fire mending one of Jed's shirts, her fingers pricked raw from the needle. He watched her for a moment, then spoke in the low rumble of a man unused to conversation. "You don't owe me this." Her voice was soft but steady. "I need to do something. To feel useful." He gave a slight nod, as though he understood without needing more. The silence that followed was not empty but companionable, filled with the steady pop of the fire and the faint creak of Eli's boots pacing outside. For the first time since her world collapsed, Clara felt a thread of peace stitch itself through her chest. In the days that followed, she found small tasks: feeding chickens, sweeping the porch, gathering herbs from the edges of the pasture. Jed never thanked her with words, but his brief half-smiles, The way his hand lingered a fraction longer when passing her a tool carried weight enough. At night, she sometimes caught him staring into the fire with eyes full of ghosts, and once, when he thought her asleep, she heard him whisper a name, Mary, like a prayer torn in half. The fragile quiet shattered a week later. Lantern light flared beyond the ranch gate and the thunder of hooves split the night. Clara jolted awake, heart hammering. Outlaws and deputies together this time, their torches painting the dark with streaks of fire. The sheriff himself sat, astride a pale horse, his smile thin and cruel. "Evenin', Cole," he drawled. "We've come for what's ours. Hand the girl and the boy over or we'll burn this place to the ground." Jed stepped into the yard, rifle across his arms. Clara, though trembling, moved to stand beside him. The torchlight threw her shadow. Tall against the cabin wall, her voice shaking but fierce. "You'll not silence me. I know what you've done, the stolen payroll, the lies. Kill me if you must, but truth don't stay buried. It'll outlive your rope, your guns, and your names." The sheriff's smirk faltered, unease rippling through the gathered men. Eli, who had once shrunk from their gazes, strode out then, jaw clenched. "You'll not take her again. If you want one of us, you'll face both." The standoff thickened, heavy as a storm about to break. Jed's presence loomed like an immovable wall, his silence a weapon sharper than any blade. The men shifted, torches wavering in uncertain hands. No shot rang out. Instead, the sheriff cursed under his breath and wheeled his horse. One by one, the others followed, their threats dissolving into the night as hoofbeats retreated across the plains. The yard fell silent but for the hiss of dying torches. Clara's knees nearly gave, yet Jed's steady hand caught her elbow. His palm was rough, warm, grounding. She looked up into his face, into the stone-gray eyes that had stood against fire and rope alike, and felt something shift within her, a quiet certainty that worth was not given by crowds, nor taken by noose, but proven in the moments one soul refused to abandon another. Later, as she wrapped a strip of cloth around Jed's hand where a torch had burned him, her fingers lingered longer than needed. Her voice, hushed, trembled with truth. "You gave us back more than life tonight. You gave us back dignity." Jed did not answer, but his gaze held hers steady and unflinching. For Clara, it was enough. Outside, the prairie stretched dark and unknowable, yet the fire within the cabin glowed steady. In that fragile light, the three of them sat together, no longer victims, not yet free, but alive, and bound by a thread, stronger than rope. And somewhere in the silence, a lesson whispered itself. That in a world ruled by gallows and guns, sometimes the bravest act was simply to stand and to stay.